Welcome back, David. Summer is upon us. So, this week, I wanted to pick up your brain about summer gains or summer burnout. Which one is going to come first? Because we both most likely are starting to come across people who go like, yeah, it's great about what you're talking and all these kind of things, but I burn really easy, or they just overdo everything, like there's too much of a good thing. Somebody sent me this week, like, hey, if you do too much cold exposure, your muscles are not gonna grow. Well, nobody's using cold exposure to grow muscle. That's to begin with. And everything else along those lines. So things first, what are the seasonal shifts in physiology? What's happening there? You mentioned multiple times, and we have kind of agreed spring and autumn. Check your blood tests. They should look different. They should. It's
Okay.
just natural. It's not that you need to be in range. It's going to show you if your body is working correctly or not. And then you go from there. So what are the most common seasonal shifts for someone who lives in, let's say, northern hemisphere, because it might be completely different down under with Aussies.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, as long as you keep it into perspective of post-winter, whether you live in the northern hemisphere or southern hemisphere, as long as you keep that perspective, then this will apply, right? So springtime, post-winter, what should be happening? If you're getting blood work, what are you going to see? That type of thing. So let's start with there, right? The purpose of getting blood work in the spring would be to know how depleted you have become of vitamin D and DHEA, right? Those would be like the first things that I want to know, because that tells you quite a bit about like how aggressive you need to be early in the season, early in the spring, to kind of start to turn those around as much as possible. So, vitamin D should go down naturally a little bit during the winter. But if you did your job the previous summer, you should have had plenty of supply to make it through the winter, right? But for whatever reason, maybe you just didn't get enough cold exposure, but you just didn't get enough actual nature in you during the winter, because that's usually the problem in the winter. Most people like to be permanently indoors, whether it's in their car or in their office or in their home. And so, if that's the case, right, you're going to also run into a few other things in the modern world. And that is things like your BUN creatinine ratio might be elevated, and things like that would be associated, for people that don't know, that would be associated, like if you took it to a doctor, they would say, oh, you need to drink more water. It's, dehydration. It's very specific type of dehydration. It's cellular dehydration. Drinking water isn't going to do anything for that. But they are right. It is a dehydration effect at the cellular level. We've discussed this in the past with my diagrams of the mitochondria, where mitochondria is making a very specific type of water. There's a reason for that specific type of water. That's what keeps all your proteins and all your substrates in the cell hydrated. So if your BUN is elevated, which stands for blood, urea, nitrogen is another word for protein, uh, then that tells you that your body is not hydrating proteins very well. The reason why it wouldn't be doing that is you are permanently indoors, you're not getting cold exposure. So the mechanisms involved with making the right type of water at the cellular level are not working correctly. And so you're going to excrete um, more nitrogen through your urine and through your blood. And so that would be something that we would see elevated if you didn't do a good job of getting some cold exposure, mitigating electromagnetic fields and that sort of stuff through the winter. The winter in the modern world is just the time when you can expect an elevation in electromagnetic field pressure on the body. That's just the nature of living in the modern world. Is it avoidable? It can be avoidable, but most people aren't going to go through the effort of doing it. Right. So that's what I would expect to see if somebody just came to me with some blood work at this time of the year. I'd expect to see some BUN high. I'd expect to see some uh, creatinine maybe a little bit elevated. I'd expect to be seeing vitamin D on the lower end of what their normal is, and I'd expect to see their DHEA a little bit on the lower end of what their normal is. If the environment is really bad, meaning they're just barely getting into this type of stuff, and they really don't spend very much time outside, whether it's summer or winter. In the winter or post-winter, I should say, you might even see something like um, hypoxia markers being elevated, meaning red blood cell count really high, even though they might not be taking drugs. Hematocrit really high, even though they might not be taking drugs. Hemoglobin really high. Those are all markers that are telling your body, hey, we don't have enough oxygen. We need to ramp up our oxygen carrying capability, and that has to do with electromagnetic field effects as well. So that's what I would want. That's not what I would want to see, but that's probably what I would expect to see, right? Now, if you did a good job of just adhering to getting proper cold exposure in the morning, mitigating as much artificial light in the winter months, post sunset as much as possible, that sort of stuff. Maybe you changed your lighting to healthier lighting, etc., that type of stuff. Then I wouldn't expect actually very much other than vitamin D maybe a little bit lower, possibly your BUN just a little bit elevated, but nothing out of whack. And that the DHEA and the vitamin D would then tell us how aggressive do you need to be with getting out in the sun right now? Now, I would argue that you want to be as aggressive as you can be at this time of the year. And there's two reasons for that. It's going to prepare you to take advantage of strong summer sun with minimal consequences at that point in time. But that starts now, right? You cannot be like, oh, I'm going to raise my vitamin D in the summer, but I'm going to start in June when it's nice and hot already. That's a recipe for getting burned. That's a recipe for enacting more stress than your body can handle, especially your skin. That's why you would get burned. And so things the other thing that I would also want tested at this point in time would be your omega-3 index. The reason for that is if you didn't do a good job about getting omega-3s in you over the winter, you're probably going to not have enough omega-3s in the skin to turn into the proper docosanoids when UV light hits them to be skin protective, right? So this would be a very important time to get an omega-3 test because that's going to actually lay down the, how would I say, the armor, the potential armor for your skin to be very resilient in the summer months. So that would be crucial. If it's low, this would be the time, right? Because you have probably 2 to 3 months before the sun gets really, really strong. This will be the time. And that's about how long it's going to take to move it up 2 or 3 points. And 2 or 3 points is enough to be extremely helpful on the omega-3 test, which would be 2 or 3 percentage points. So those would be the things that we want to do. Now, why is this time of the year unique? This time of the year is unique because you are capable of turning on 2 programs with light at this time of the year. So I'll be specific. Everybody kind of understands that the days are getting a little bit longer. The sun is getting a little bit stronger. The UV index is climbing a little bit. So you're getting UV light at this time of the year. So you're getting infrared and UV light at this time of the year, anytime that it's sunny or even half cloudy, right? You'll notice that the days tend to be sunnier. They tend to be, for your given region, right? They tend to be a little bit sunnier. They tend to be a little bit longer. So you have more time to be able to be outside. And the window of UV light is expanding, meaning it's not a 1 hour time in the middle of the day. It's more like a 3 hour time in the middle of the day. And then in a couple of weeks, it'll be a 4 hour time in the middle of the day, etc. And so the UV window starts to expand. You get more leeway on when you can get outside and get the benefits. It starts to expand. So you get more ability to, or how would I get more chances to get it right? More chances to get outside at the right time. And that's always beneficial. But the temperature is also not quite warm, right? Most people would not call it warm, right? 12 degrees Celsius, 10 degrees Celsius, maybe 15 degrees Celsius, right? On some days. Those are like the perfect temperatures to enact cold exposure, right? Like most people think that you need to be in a cold plunge or something like that. And we've talked about this before. Cold exposure starts at 55 degrees Fahrenheit, which is like 12 and a half degrees Celsius, something like that. And that is where cold exposure starts. What does it do at that temperature or slightly below that? Whenever your skin senses that type of temperature or slightly below, it ramps up mitochondrial function. in all of your cells. What does that do? It creates infrared light. That's going to be body heat and ultra weak UV light. This has been demonstrated by Fritz Popp and another guy named Gerwich with like just plants, right? Whenever you plants and other mammals, whenever you induce this cold exposure at this particular level, it ramps up anything with the mitochondria, ramps up light production. That light is ultra weak UV light, just like what you would get stronger than the sun, actually. It's UVC and infrared light. And you're getting UV light and infrared light from externally. So, what does that mean in terms of what's going to happen? You're going to tan yourself on the inside and you're going to tan yourself on the outside. You're going to make melanin internally and externally at this time of the year. That is incredibly important to turn on regeneration programs. Um, it's very important because melanin is a crucial component for nervous system function. It's a crucial component for smooth muscles in the organ systems. It's a crucial component for your brain, and it's a crucial component for your skin to react correctly to strong sunlight to come. Now, what else does melanin do once you have it? It absorbs all radiation, all of it. It is electromagnetic field protective. It is protective against the radiation from the sun. And any energy that your body can extract from natural radiation, let's just call it that, sunlight, is going to be exponentially augmented when you have good melanin sheets, both externally and externally. So it starts to prevent things like, what most people would call overtraining, overreaching, that sort of stuff. You're not going to really experience that in the summer if you've created a great base level of melanin on the outside and on the inside. You're going to basically become what this podcast is all about, superhuman. You will be somebody who just does things and people are like, how can you do that? Well, how, like I have a client, right? Where I've taught him about this type of stuff. And what he says is, man, I can go to Mexico and I don't burn. I just get out in the sun. I literally do whatever I want outside without giving a care of like what I'm wearing or what any of that. Because the first thing I notice is people don't think that that's normal. I'm like, they're mind blown that you can just go outside whenever the hell you want without any precaution, without clothes on if you want, with clothes on if you want, and you don't seem to care about what the sun is doing. And he's like, before this, I used to be one of those people. And then when you taught me how to do all this stuff, it's like, nah, it doesn't really matter. If you're doing things correctly, you just go outside and you have a great time every single time. It doesn't really matter. And people are mind blown about that. The group of people keep commenting on like, well, how does he get away with that? And this guy is white. He's white, right? So he's not somebody who has dark skin or any of that. Doesn't burn worth anything. And only gets benefits. Why? Because he's executing on these little habits of cold exposure combined with sunlight and grounding, right? Like just being, he wears grounding shoes. Again, there are shoes now that are legitimately look like sneakers and actually ground you. I've tested a few of them out. So there's technology that's being developed to kind of make these habits easier. But yeah, being grounded while you're outside, doing what I'm talking about right now at this time of the year is very, very important to augment that regeneration program.
And I just want to add you that something we picked up ages ago. You don't necessarily need to go out and take your shoes off. You can just literally go and put your arm on a tree, just stand
Right.
for 10, 15 minutes, and it's all done and dusted. Because sometimes in the middle of the city, you don't want to take shoes off.
You're right. You're right. The grounding effect doesn't, I know the word is ground, right? But it doesn't have to be the ground. It can be anything that's in the ground. It could be a metal post. Not joking. It could be a metal post, a metal fence post, right? You could be touching it with your shoulder. You could be touching it with your hand. It doesn't really matter as long as you are making that connection to the ground somehow is what matters. So yes, thanks for pointing that out. And then the other thing is the reason why I'm saying so far we've gotten to the point of, okay, sunlight is getting stronger. You're getting UV light. You're getting melanin on the outside. The sun's not quite strong enough to burn you yet. So you're getting a lot of benefits with very little risk. The cold is still present, so you're turning on that internal melanin production mechanism, and the grounding and getting hydrated correctly. Remember what I said, the other markers that might be off right now this time of the year are these hydration markers, right? BUN, creatinine, those types of things. So grounding and being extra hydrated, that means like drinking an extra liter of water before you go out and do this type of activity with some sodium in it.
To add something to that water, uh, you
I
know,
would add electrolytes. I would add electrolytes. I could potentially see the case for adding in vitamin C, like a high dose vitamin C. Um, that depending on like how off your markers on could potentially also be useful to have something like methylene blue on board. The reason for that is vitamin C, methylene blue, these even vitamin K, things of this nature, they tend to make it so that you augment the water production at the cellular level. Methylene blue does it more than others, but it has other effects like donating
that's a
electrons.
bad hitter. You're going into big boys territory now.
Yeah. Like that's not one of those things where like everybody should do that. That's like, okay, you took some blood work, you see some blood work, you're like, wow, we really need to kind of fix this pretty quickly. There's a strategy to using the methylene blue for this purpose. And it's not like everyday type of thing. It's like very strategic. You're doing it when you're doing this. You're being extra hydrated. And then something that I would say for anybody could do this. It's not going to be harmful at all, and it's only going to be beneficial. It is on the expensive side. Is deuterium depleted water at this time of the year when you're doing this type of activity? Deuterium depleted water with some electrolytes in it would be enormously beneficial at this time of the year when you're getting sunlight and cold exposure at the same time. Because there's a reason why I'm harping on this, right? Where we're creating melanin everywhere. But here's what you got to know about melanin. It has two functions depending on the state of hydration, right? And we know this from studies from NASA, right? NASA is using dehydrated melanin on solar panels because it's way more efficient at transporting electrons and making electrons, basically making electricity, right? When it's dehydrated. When melanin is dehydrated, it's very electrical conductive, right? When it is hydrated, it's still conductive, but it's a very specific conductivity. It's a very tiny micro wattage or micro voltage, I should say, that's being executed. Now, from the work of somebody called Dr. Robert O. Becker, he has several books. One of them is called The Body Electric. He literally lays out now in that Body Electric book, he actually goes through some of he studied regeneration, like human regeneration, right? He was able to regrow a finger, like bone, joint, everything on somebody who's had their finger chopped off by inducing a very micro voltage on that person on their finger, completely regrew it. That's the regeneration program. The regeneration program in humans, in mammals, and amphibians, this is actually a leftover from evolution of amphibians, is a very low micro voltage going on. And that's what induces regeneration at all levels. That is turned on when melanin is hydrated and you're hitting it with light, right? So if you're dehydrated, what did I say will happen? Your melanin actually becomes more voltic, right? There's more electricity running through it. That means you're going to create more dopamine. That means you're going to create more adrenaline, noradrenaline, but it's not going to turn on the regeneration program until you're fully hydrated. That's why at night, vasopressin goes up because that's when your regeneration program should turn on. What is vasopressin? It's an antidiuretic hormone. What does that mean? You're going to retain water. You're going to try to keep yourself hydrated, right? That's the whole role of night versus day. During the day, it's going to be incredibly hard to keep melanin creating a very small voltage. It creates a bigger voltage, but what does that do? It turns on all these wakeful hormones and neurotransmitters. You start creating dopamine, noradrenaline, cortisol, etc. And then at night, when the sun goes away, the electricity goes away, the voltage of the melanin should go very, very low, and then it gets amplified and goes even lower when vasopressin gets raised. So that's also why I pay attention to when people tell me how often they urinate at night, because that tells me that they're not releasing very much vasopressin, right? It tells me that there might be some interference from electromagnetic fields. It tells me they might be slightly dehydrated at night, which means they're not going to turn on the regeneration program. This is very important to understand that little part that I just mentioned about hydration and melanin.
Let me pick up your brain a little bit more about the deuterium depleted water because we know it costs around $20 for a bottle like this.
Mhm.
How much is enough? Is it enough just like, let's say, 200 mil a day, something like that? Also, when it comes to dehydration and a lot of things that people usually go, they go from 1 liter, 2 liters of fluid a day to like four. And then they go, oh, I'm peeing all the time and I'm this and I'm
Mhm.
that. So my strategy is usually checking how much carbohydrates they're eating. If they're eating too much of like a sugary stuff, I know they're gonna probably go to toilet more often. And I also check resting heart rate. And I have found a really big correlation with very high resting heart rate and the amount of toilet visits. Like they just
Yeah.
don't hydrate themselves properly because they work on such a thing. So is this something for them to consider? Hey, it's summer, it's spring. I need to get more resilient to all the heat that's going to come up. Maybe they need to check their fitness levels and to speed it up. How much deuterium depleted water would be enough for somebody to make it plausible? Because we know most likely you will have to order it online.
Yeah, yeah. So a couple different questions in there. So let's talk about the fitness part first for just a moment. And so that's also why, again, part of our superhuman, like if you've been following our superhuman series right from the very beginning, we basically laid out in the first like 10 episodes how easy it is to get this all moving. One of them is, hey, you go outside every single morning, you get 20 to 30 minutes of just nasal breathing cardiovascular work. That alone, done outside, is enough to bring the resting heart rate down. It's enough to get fitness right down. That's also part of this hydration amalgam, right? Infrared light in the morning is going to create more ATP in the morning, right? Everybody kind of understands infrared light association with ATP. What's the other thing that's required to make ATP when you do it that way? Proper hydration, right? One of the byproducts of making that ATP is CO2 that you're going to breathe out and water at the cellular level. And you're going to bring down your heart rate. So now your fitness level goes up so that you're not going to have to urinate. You're not going to be as dehydrated for the rest of the day. So that is a crucial component to making sure that you undo this is getting that cardiovascular work done regularly. Ideal, to get the best bang for your buck is doing it outside in the morning, or you could do it in the afternoon, especially as the weather is better. Um, and so there's that component, right? The other thing about fitness is, uh, or hydration, right? Especially because we're talking about cellular hydration. What's the two components to make water at the cellular level? Oxygen, that's what you're breathing in. So breath work, that's why nasal breathing is very important to kind of restrict the amount of oxygen so that you're making the proper cascades and not making too much reactive oxygen species, and that sort of stuff. Now, to answer the question about the deuterium depleted water, so there is a saliva test you can take to see what your deuterium level is in your saliva at this moment, right? So to be precise, right, you could be like, okay, if my saliva test comes back at like 48, right, or 50, sorry, not 48, 148 or 150 parts per million deuterium, then I could tell you that you're probably going to need 1.5 liters per day for about a month to get it down to about 120 parts per million. That's kind of what you're targeting. The mitochondria, like, so this water that the mitochondria is supposed to make that's deuterium depleted, it's targeting about 110, right? So the water that's in your cells is or should be right around 110 parts per million. You're trying to bring down your extracellular fluid. That's why you're going to test your saliva. So extracellular fluids, if you bring them down to about 120, then you can pretty much bet that the inner mitochondrial cellular water is below 110. Right now, if your extracellular fluid, your saliva test comes back high 140s or above that, 150 or 160, then it's very unlikely that you have enough of a hydration and well put diet together that your mitochondria is making deuterium depleted water at 110 parts per million or lower. So if it's not too far off, right? And you can kind of do this two ways, right? If you want to get it done quickly, like within a month, you're going to need more water, more deuterium depleted water. If you don't care, right, but you can afford it, right, even if it's like half a liter a day, then what you do is literally don't ramp up the amount. Like, say you're drinking 2 liters of water right now, right, total for the day. Then a half a liter of water done for a long enough time is going to be beneficial because it's going to lower the total amount of deuterium in your diet, right? Other things that would be helpful is um, all fats and proteins will have less natural, right, coming from animals like eggs, steak, beef, lard, uh, ghee, all of these types of things, all animal fats, animal proteins, they're all going to be less deuterium anyway, right? So if you are eating that type of diet or having plenty of those in your diet, and then things with the highest amount of deuterium are going to be any processed food. So you're eliminating those processed foods. That's anything packaged. I don't care if it's a protein shake or a protein bar or a snack. If it's packaged, it's going to have a lot more deuterium. Why? Because those are made in a lab. Labs don't have control of deuteration. They actually probably augment deuteration because they don't create anything in sunlight. They create everything under synthetic lights. So it's probably going to have more deuterium than normal. And then when it comes to natural products, natural foods, the things with the most deuterium are going to be fruits, right? So any berries, any fruit that grows on top of the plant, right? Some people classify, like sweet potatoes as fruits, but those are tubers, right? So it doesn't mean the sweetness level doesn't really matter. It's whether it grows on top of a tree at the end of a strong solar cycle. If it does that, then it has more deuterium than the rest of the food that you're eating. So eliminating those types of things. If you find that, like, for example, your BUN creatinine ratio is really, really, really high, and you have cardiovascular inflammatory problems, and then you get a saliva test of deuterium, and all of a sudden it's like 155 or 160, then yeah, I would go out of my way to have some deuterium depleted water as much as you can afford consistently, right? It's not about drinking all of it at once. That's not really how it works, right? Just like regular water intake. It's about making sure that you're hitting this amount regularly, right? So you could get away with as little as half a liter of water done over an extended period of time, a month or two, probably two. If you can afford it and you could do a whole liter, I find that most people with just 1 liter of water, which would be about half of the water that they drink for the day, um, is going to do pretty well and really undo some of these effects. That has zero consequence, right? It's not like the methylene blue where you got to be careful, that you're not taking depression medications and taking other drugs, and that you're not over, like, there's no consequence, is what I got to say to the water. The water is always going to be beneficial. It's always going to do what it's supposed to do, and I just haven't seen a problem with consuming too much. Like, if you could afford it and you did, and I have some clients that literally, like one guy, in 21 days, he went from 150 parts per million to 115 parts per million in 21 days. But he only drank deuterium depleted water. He drank 2 liters a day. He just like, okay, well, I can afford it. So I'm just going to make sure all the water I drink, even for my coffee, is deuterium depleted water. And in 21 days, he did the test, and he's like, and to boot, the guy was dieting and hitting new VO2 max performance markers the whole time. He truly was like, wow, whatever this water is doing, it's clearly performance enhancing. And the reason why is because deuterium depleted water enhances the speed of enzymatic action at the cellular level. That's why cells want deuterium depleted water. It makes the communication and the work that the cells are doing much more efficient.
I think we have a video just on that, maybe 2, 3 years old now. And from what we have spoken about and what you have mentioned about and how you described that, is basically improves efficiency about how quick your body can make energy. So you make it,
Mhm.
it's like lubricant for engine, pretty much, if I understand it.
Yeah, yeah. Think about it like that. Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. You're getting an oil change, right? You're getting an oil change, and the beautiful thing about like doing things correctly, like getting cold exposure, mitigating electromagnetic fields, is that this oil change is happening all the time live. You're always having fresh oil, right? Because your mitochondria is making deuterium depleted water for you if you put it in the right environment. But if you get some blood work that clearly shows, hey, I'm not in the right environment, I haven't been doing the right things, you can manually change your oil by dumping it with a bunch of deuterium depleted water. It will work. It is on the expensive side, but it definitely works.
Yeah, we could do another episode just on that, but I do want to touch up quickly before I let you go on things that can be done too much. Too much sun exposure, too much cold exposure, too much of this, too much of that. I spoke just a couple of days ago with somebody I work with, and she was like, "Yeah, I'm doing cold exposure, and I started with 5 minutes a day." And she's going with like an ice bath. And I'm like, I've
Mhm.
never done it before. And you're coming from like southern parts of like it doesn't
Yeah, 5 minutes a day is a little aggressive, right? Now, it depends on the temperature of the water. If you told me the temperature of the water was only
ice.
12,
There is ice.
yeah, if there's ice in it, it's probably a little aggressive, right? I don't think that I would go with 5 minutes right off the bat at that cold, right? I would probably go with something like 3 minutes, maybe 2 minutes, right? Because the thing, again, cold exposure is this tricky thing because everybody thinks that cold exposure is what you just described, an ice bath. An ice bath is a training session, right? That's what an ice bath is, right? Like think of it like our cardio spectrum, right? Like, hey, I just want you to get outside, get some zone 2 nasal breathing for 20 minutes outside. That's not a training session. Like there's going to be a training effect, but it's not going to cost you anything, right? That's what 55-degree water or 55-degree air temperature is, right? That's why I'm saying like right now is kind of like the ideal time. You just step outside with minimal clothing, your body's going to get cold, right? You're going to get goosebumps and you're going to get cold, but it's not going to cost you anything other than it's going to turn on that program of regeneration and internal melanin. Now, that versus I'm going to go in a 40-degree water with ice in it for 5 minutes, that's a training session. That would be like saying, hey, I'm going to jump on the elliptical or the assault bike and I'm going to do sprint intervals for 10 minutes, right? That's a training session now. That's going to cost you something, right? That's the thing about cold exposure. There is a sliding scale that quickly slips into, hey, this is a training session. And if you haven't prepared yourself correctly, it's going to cost you more than you can give, right? So yeah, you're 100% right. You can overdo cold exposure, especially if you don't know what you're doing. You have to treat it like training once you start doing ice baths and things of that nature. So this is how I would gauge it, the cold exposure specifically, right? If it takes you longer than 20 minutes to warm back up from it, that's a training session. You need to account that and treat it like a training session, meaning you need recovery after, right? You don't plan on doing much after that. If it takes you less than 20 minutes to warm up, it's probably not affecting you negatively, and that's totally fine to proceed forward. That makes it a little bit more customizable for the individual, right? Because some people will adapt quickly, right? Especially if they're in a good environment. So 5 minutes might not be that big of a deal if you warm back up within 20 minutes really easily. Or here's what I would consider a kind of like the nasal breathing in the morning and the outside. It costs you nothing and it only amplifies effects. If you can get in a cold plunge, whatever temperature it is for however long you do it, and you get out of it or you come back inside, and within 5 minutes you're actually warm, like you're radiating heat, uh, then I would say that's more of a hormetic effect, and you can do that pretty much every single day, right? Like that's not going to, it's only augmenting, right? Because you come back in and immediately you start sweating, you start warming back up almost immediately within the first 5, 10 minutes of being back inside or whatever, or putting clothes on. Then I would say that's a hormetic effect. You could do whatever that was pretty much every day without consequence, maybe even multiple times a day without consequence. But the moment it's going to cost you, like, oh, it takes me 20 minutes to stop shivering and get warmed back up, that's a training effect. You probably should only do that twice a week at the most at first, something like that. So hopefully that's helpful with the cold exposure. Now let's talk about the sunlight. That's where it's very important. That's why we're doing the video now, right? Going outside and getting burned or your skin starts really changing colors very, very easily. You start getting rashes. That's a big one, rashes with sunlight. That tells me that you have a fat lipid problem, meaning you don't have enough omega-3s on the skin to take advantage of the the way that I like to describe it is whenever you put like vegetable oil on a hot pan, if the pan's too hot, it starts smoking, it starts boiling, right? It starts turning black and shit. Same thing that's happening on your skin, right? If you have too many omega-6s in your skin and you go outside, you're going to get a rash, right? Even when the sun's not very strong. So this is a good test period, right? If the sun's not very strong at this time of the year and you go outside and you get a rash, a sun rash, you become allergic to the sun. It doesn't tell me you're allergic to the sun. It tells me you have the wrong lipids in your skin. You need an omega-3 test or just start eating a lot of omega-3s to start changing that. That can change pretty quickly at the skin level. It can turn over, I think the skin turns over every 45 days or something like that. So it can turn over within 6 weeks, right? So that's, you can clearly get too much sun if you have the wrong lipids in the skin. That would be my first thing that I would worry about in terms of too much sun. Do you have the right lipids in your skin? Because if you have the right
I
lipids in
see
your skin,
that a lot, especially in the
yeah,
UK, because everyone is so pale and they just eat takeaways. And the younger kids specifically, their face is just covered in all kind of things.
yeah,
And in
yeah.
spring, predominantly, not in the
Yeah,
winter, not in
yeah,
any
yeah,
time
yeah.
else.
It's because it's a reaction to the sunlight. Now I said it that way, but it's a reaction of I have the wrong lipids on my skin and it's reacting with the sun inappropriately, just like putting vegetable oil on a hot pan is obviously not the right thing to do. You don't cook food with vegetable oil on a hot pan. You cook it with saturated fats, you cook it with high heat resilient things, and that's where the omega-3s come in. So yes, you're 100% right. So this is probably one of the biggest things because everybody thinks, well, I'm just allergic to the sun. There's nothing I can do about it. That's probably not true, right? There's a lot you can do about it if you know where you're looking. The other thing about sunlight, most people will have a problem with like bright sunlight. Like their eyes hurt. Their eyes are watering, and they have to put sunglasses on. We talked about this before. You don't want to be wearing sunglasses when you're outside. That's going to make you burn. So if you're getting like the eyes are not capable of handling that level of light, that tells me again, you probably have a lipid problem. You don't have because your eyes and your brain have the most DHA, sorry, in the whole body. So it's a DHA problem. It's also an infrared problem, meaning your eyes are requiring more infrared light to be able to handle the UV light that's outside. That's why they're watering. Why is water so important here? Water is a red light chromophore. What does that mean? It absorbs red light very, very good. That's what makes the waters blue and green, is because blue and green are the only thing being reflected back. The red and the pinks and the oranges are being absorbed by the water. Those are higher energy wavelengths. That means that your eye is energy absent to be able to absorb the UV light. Remember this is the photoelectric effect 101 by Albert Einstein. You need electrons, aka energy, in order to absorb other electrons, right? So if your eyes are not capable of absorbing the UV electrons, it's trying to find a way to gather more energy. It starts to water so that it can gather more infrared light. So infrared therapy, morning daylight, what do all evening daylight. If you're somebody that goes out in the middle of the day and your eyes water and you can't stand to be outside without sunglasses, what you really need is a lot more morning time, a lot more evening time, and possibly even supplementing with an infrared light, shine, not necessarily directly at your face, but like in the environment so that you can stand bright noon sunlight. So yes, you can overdo sunlight, even if you're doing things naturally and trying to avoid it. These are some of the little tidbits that you've got to pay attention to.
I'll just try to summarize it all. I'm mindful of your time. So, while sun is coming and summer is inevitable, hopefully, there are some risks to be taken care of. You know what David just described. Check your vitamin D, DHEA, run your blood tests in the spring, run your blood tests late in the summer to see where you're at. And make sure that you are mindful about false positives, so to speak. If you're taking some supplement, take that in account as well, because that might be something that you might be vitamin D depleted, but you don't even know that because your supplement is vitamin D. So another thing is that don't get caught up with trying to fix everything with a pill. I think that's the main message we always try to put out there. That try to figure out why something is out of line. You know, if you're getting really tired from just being exposed to sun for too long, and so on and so forth, why is this happening? Maybe you're just not cardiovascularly fit enough to recover, because being in the sun is still stress. It's still pressure on your body. And whilst there is a lot of benefits, and we do feel 10 times better when it's sunny outside, it can literally make you feel worse.
Yeah, yeah. If you haven't prepped the body correctly, like the strategies that we've talked about earlier in this video, yeah, you can be one of those people that can literally say, I'm allergic to the sun. It makes me feel bad. I don't enjoy it. I don't like it, right? That's not a consequence of you're a unique individual. That's a consequence of you've changed your body enough through modern living that now it doesn't have a hormetic response to sunlight. That's not like it's not you're genetically doomed. It's you need to change certain habits to change your epigenetic response to sunlight.
Hmm. Yeah, and this is where it goes to, like, you become codependent on supplements, vitamins, caffeine, HRT,
Medications.
you name
Yep.
it. So awesome, David. Appreciate your time as usual. And I'll see you next video.
Thank you.